Okay, so let's begin. Hi, everyone. I'm Jimson Lee for speedendurance.com, and welcome to day 2 of 2, or the final day of the World Juniors or the Under 20 World Championships in Nairobi. Once again, if you missed the first day, it's on the YouTube channel. I'll post the link below. Otherwise, I'm anxious and eager, and we have lots to talk about tonight. So let's begin. So on that note, we'll open up with Frank Dick for a few words. Frank?
Okay, thanks, Jimson, and welcome everybody, especially welcome to the panelists again. Really looking forward to an exciting evening after an exciting week's competition. First of all, I'm Frank Dick. If you don't know who I am, I do some stuff in coaching over the last few years. I've got the privilege to chair the World Athletics Coaching Body, which is the Global Athletics Coaching Academy. It was a body that Seb Coe requested, and his exact words, he wanted a body to be formed from amongst the coaching community. So therefore, this is for coaches, by coaches and for coaches, dedicated to athletics coaching related matters, and most importantly, to facilitate necessary change. One of the things we're working on to change is to promote area and national coaches associations. We're working with them to identify with them so that we can create a world coaching community. By coaching initiatives such as Quarterly Coaching Matters and by the coaches clubs at world level and at area level, we're connecting with that community, and we're also creating a new form of communication, especially in these days now when we can get to people virtually as well as on site. But without me taking much further time about the World Athletics Coaching Academy, I'd better pass it on to the person who's in charge of that, both on the ground and helping us to do it virtually, Terry Crawford.
Thank you, Frank, and welcome to everybody that's on the call. A special thank you goes out to Jimson in being our moderator today, and of course our panelists who are prepared to answer any questions that come in and also offer their expert advice. We've had some exciting competition over the last week in Nairobi that speaks certainly to the athletes' development pathway, as we saw young people perform phenomenal times and heights and distances. And so again, I think it speaks to the benefit of us all being able together, whether virtually or in a face-to-face situation as we plan for the future, to have discussion and exchange of ideas and thoughts as we as coaches strive to always be better for our athletes. So today, of course, we are talking again on the athletes' development pathway. With the junior athlete, that obviously is important. And so before we start that discussion, I just want to mention that moving forward, please be watching for announcements from your member federation, your area coaches association, and of course, World Athletics as we move into 2022, and we'll be hosting a coaches club in Belgrade for the World Indoor Championships. We obviously hope that's going to be a face-to-face meeting, but we definitely plan for a blended engagement where we will always continue now to have a virtual part of the Coaches Club. And then moving on to the World Athletics Outdoor in Eugene, Oregon, definitely moving toward a brick and mortar opportunity, as well as developing a better program for our junior competitions. I think we've all been very pleased with what we've seen in the discussion coming from the World Junior Championship in Nairobi. So again, as a coach, we hope you are getting excited about becoming a regular member of the Coaches Club. And if you want to get information, you want to really become an engaged member, be sure you're checking with our area coaches associations, which thanks to Frank, have starting to build a program that will be regional and will be easily accessible to you. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to Jimson so that we start to talk about World Junior Championships.
Great, thanks, Terry. So if you want just the news and results, you can just go to Google or the website, get results. The purpose of these calls is to dive deeper into the events and understand the coaching development and pathways of these events. So what better way to start with 2 words, Sasha Zoya of France. I mean, yes, and what better panelist to start off would be Rita Engelbrecht. She's a world authority on high performance in the short and long hurdles. Formerly South Africa head hurdles coach and coached the Olympic hurdles and mentor to coaches around the world. Rita, welcome back. I know I want to start off with you. What can we say about this French boy? Okay, granted the hurdles are a bit shorter than the men's, but what are your thoughts about his 2 races?
First of all, I think I have to give a little bit of background information on this interesting gentleman. He's got a French mother and a Zimbabwean father. He lives for 6 months in Perth, Australia, and 6 months in France. Now, what is so interesting for the coaches is that he has got 2 coaches in Australia, 2 in France, I think it's in Paris, and they are working together. How awesome is that for coaching? I think that is the beginning of something that can work for people. I mean, if I look at a sports like rugby, they have a forwards coach and a strength coach and a this coach. Why can't we have a panel of coaches helping an athlete like this? Now, this is the one part. The second part that is so interesting about him is that he is a very accomplished ballet dancer. Now, if you look at the way this young man goes over the hurdles, he doesn't hurdle. He is like a stream that flows over cobbles. He flows over the hurdles. The last person I have seen flowing over a hurdle was Colin Jackson. But he flows better over hurdle than Colin Jackson. What I think is what is happening with the strength, and that we talked about the Pilates and the core strength of the previous discussion. I think that the basis of ballet, having such a strong core, the power development and everything suits him very, very well. Now, people say, well, he's not that tall. But if you look at him, his center of gravity is very high and his legs are long with a very short, much shorter upper body. So I think that running this time and having that leg speed and flowing over those hurdles, we are going to see somebody, I think, that is going to run in the future much faster than 12.80. I'm not saying that he's going to do it immediately, and I know that there's an adaptation with the hurdles, but if I look at his general strength and his attitude towards that, if he stays healthy, I think we have a Karsten Warholm on the 110 hurdles.
Wow.
And that is really what I would like to say about this fantastic gentleman.
So great analysis. So quick question to anyone on the panelists here. I think, so what mistakes would people make if people were to inherit this young lad or the current coach today? What mistakes do you think that could be potentially dangerous? Like if any, like too much speed, too much strength, start making him do power cleans in the weight room every day, or do you make him keep doing what he's doing?
Can I continue?
Yeah, Rita, yeah, please.
I would say that he obviously has a recipe that works for him. Yeah. And I can't see him changing any way. If I actually had a look in his background, where does his hurdling come from? His hurdling came from when he was 13 or 12 or 13 years old. He ran ridiculous time for the 100 hurdles at that younger stage of something like 12.8 or something like that. People didn't want to believe it. They always thought that the stopwatches were wrong when they took his time when he was a junior. But I'm saying is that if you have a recipe like this working for this gentleman, I would never, if it was my athlete, I would never change anything. I will keep him with the 4 coaches that he has, and it looks like he's going to continue. I don't know what his future plans are for university, whatever, but he is doing exceptionally well. And I think the background of the ballet is obviously, he's also a very accomplished pole vaulter. He pole vault 5.54 meters. So obviously that athletic ability, and also he is in charge of his body, where very few people that age is so aware of where he is in space in relation to the hurdles. So he is totally aware of where he is. And the way he accelerated, I mean, he broke the junior world record in the heats, but he touched the last 3 hurdles. He had a clean race. And obviously he's so aware of what he's doing and the people helping him and assisting him, knowing that he had to do just that little bit adjustment at the end and concentrate, and that brought that fantastic time. So if I had a say in that, which I obviously don't, I would never, ever let him not continue with what he's doing.
Okay. Okay, Michael Bennett, we're really short on time here. So quickly, would you change anything or not change anything on this young lad?
So there's very small things I would change. Continue improving biomechanics and his overall technique. Then continue improving his overall power production and his efficiency. Those are the only things you're looking to improve. You don't want to make any major changes because he's had success, but you don't want to say that because he's so good, he can't improve. Because a lot of times you see athletes that are very, very accomplished young, and then coaches are resistant to actually help them get better. So people that get better, keep working on biomechanics. Technique.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Anybody else on hurdles before we move on? I think Frank, quickly on hurdles.
Very, very quickly, just to support something that Rita said earlier. Because of necessity, when I was working with, say, decathletes, I had to involve other coaches for different parts of the program. And so I've grown up in my coaching career having to rely on other people. Harry Mara doesn't agree with that, by the way. He thinks that the decathlon coach should do everything. But I can't believe, certainly in my case, I didn't know enough about all of the events, so you had to bring other people in. So I endorse what Rita's saying. It's a different way of thinking, but I think more coaches should think about it.
Okay, no, good points, Frank. Okay, great. I want to move on to the relays. I know we're flip-flopping a lot, but the relays were exciting because I just watched it like 2 hours ago. So I wanted to call on Danny Cornelius. He's head of Tux Athletics at the University of Pretoria and high performance coach in the long and triple jump. Also now manager of athletics for South Africa Relays program. Welcome, Danny, and comments on the winning 4x4 or 4x1 team earlier today.
Well, actually, it was actually amazing, the 4x1. If you look at the Jamaicans, the ladies, they actually were just before the men, and they were the first team to run under 43 seconds. They also broke the world junior record, under 42.94, which I think was amazing. And like Fran said earlier, before we started, I mean, the lady that ran the last leg ran a sub-10 leg, which is phenomenal. I mean, I've never seen that before. That is just crazy. So there's definitely lots of talent. And then also the South African men, I think we did exceptionally well. For a team to break the world junior record, 53.51, and evidently it's actually really, it's very ironic, but the Americans, they were not there, but both their records fell to the Jamaicans and South Africans. But the thing is, the South Africans, for instance, they are still, all of them are still juniors next year. In Kali, which means that they've got the ability to run much faster, and I can see them running a sub 38. All the changeovers was not 100%, unfortunately, so there can still be a lot of things that can work on. But just as a matter of interest, also our ladies, the South African ladies, for instance, broke a record that stood since 1984. Now, we came 7th, but yet we broke our national record. And that's what we're also dealing with, is to get our ladies up to also up to that level where we can run with the Jamaicans and the Americans. But it's we are very fortunate to have so many good young athletes, which is not only good for South Africa, but it's also good for the rest of the world when we can have relays on that level. Because if you look at the 4x1 men, I think it was only one team that didn't run a national record. I think all of them run national records or area records, which I think is phenomenal.
Yeah, so question for, I guess, for you. So for the 4 teams, 4x1, 4x4, men's and women's, was there any training camps? Did they practice a lot together?
Well, we are fortunate with our men and our women. 3 of the men that ran in the final all came from the University of Pretoria, the men and the women. So they had some training before they left. Not much, but they also trained with the senior men. That made it a little bit easier, and that's, I think, one of our the secrets of our success is that the majority of them come from the same club, and that also helps quite a lot. So they are used to each other, they train together, they know each other, And I think that does help. Hopefully this can actually translate to much better times and maybe a medal in the Olympic Games or in a few years' time.
Okay, so here's a general question for both yourself and Rita and any of the sprint coaches here. So Mexico City is 2,250 meters altitude, and Nairobi is 1,750. So just 500 meters short of Mexico. What effect did the altitude have on this meet for the sprints and hurdles? Rita, go first maybe, then Danny after.
I think obviously that the height above sea level plays a very important role. The air is thinner, you can run faster. And I think that in some of the middle and the long distance, it maybe wasn't so nice, but you know, the Kenyans are used to it. We are used to it. In our countries used to it. So yes, I think that it's going to play a role, and it's not going to influence the African countries that much, but I think some of the European countries most obviously are going to go to altitude training and try and adapt. And I think again, the sprints are going to benefit hugely in Mexico. It's no, I mean, we remember the Bob Beeman long jump record also at altitude and things like that. And I really think that it is something that people will have to start planning now already, because you don't get used to altitude in 1 year. You'll have to gradually bring it into your program from now already and gradually increase it. But it's always a question of cost. Can the nation afford it? Well, they're all going to go to Nairobi, train there, or come to Joburg or Johannesburg or Pretoria, train there. But it is something that you have to consider, and it's a very serious aspect, especially for maybe for your middle distance athletes. They are the ones, and Gunter can, I see his hand is up. He most probably can give you better advice on that than me on the middle distance, but it's definitely going to play a role.
Yeah, definitely is going to get that Gunter about that for the distance. But Gunter, you have your hand up. Comments on what Rita said.
Good evening, everybody. Concerning the sprint performance, I think we have also to face and to look into the effects of gender. You all know that below 400 and higher than the mile, we have the regulation that hyperandrogen athletes can compete, which I think is a regulation which should be reconsidered after this competition. Because we have seen the 200-meter woman, we have seen the 4x1 women. So I think we should check if it is really serious that we believe that testosterone is not improving sprint performance. To make it a little bit cynical, generations of dopers in sprint cannot be wrong. The other interesting news is 2 days ago, on the other side of the frame, in 2 miles, the bronze medalist from Rio, you remember we had these 3 athletes in Rio, the bronze medalist from Burundi, Francine Nyong-Saba, she did a fantastic 2 miles in Eugene. So she was just 2 seconds slower than the ever best 2 miles. She did a 9:00.75. So on both sides of our window, we have an incredible performance level, which I think needs that we amend or reconsider our actual regulation. Thank you.
Okay, well, speaking of altitude, Sean Pickering posed a good question. So if you're a sprinter, is there a benefit to training at altitude? Anybody want, Frank, you want to post that, answer that?
Yeah, sure. If you go back to the days of the DDR, the main reason for taking their athletes, whether it was throwers, jumpers, or sprinters, was for speed training.
Yeah,
to get the benefit of almost an overcompensation and speed. I have to say, from a British point of view, we kind of saw the advantage of going there for endurance events, because after all, that's where the Kenyans come from, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And but we missed that. We missed that at that point. And if you go back to okay, he got a bit of a bad name, but he wasn't all bad in what he knew about track and field sprinting. Charlie Francis was very keen to get Ben up there to do his speed stuff in full flight, to control speed when you're at speed.
Yeah, I know being Canadian, we used to always go to Provo, Utah in May, only because we're chasing standards. None of us had standard and we're trying to get standard. We go to Provo 3 weeks and race every second day. Anyway, that's a recipe for disaster. A couple of hands up quickly on altitude training. Danny, Cornelius, your comments?
Yep, I just want to add what Frank just said. At the University of Pretoria, where I am currently based at, is with about 1,350 meters above sea level. And we've actually taken into play that we wanted to be the best sprinting institution in the country. Now, as you can see, Afghani Simbine, all those guys, Gift Lela, all those guys come from Pretoria. So what I would say is that we've really been benefiting because we're high above sea level, that the guys actually can run faster and they can actually run over speed. And I think it's definitely beneficial the higher you are above sea level for the sprints. And I can attest to that. It's been wonders that we've got a good track, also high above sea level.
Okay, Rita, you had your hand up. Comment on the altitude?
Yeah, very short. We know that the altitude is for the overcompensation to increase the red blood cells and the hemoglobin that carries the oxygen. But remember, the further we go in the sprints up into the 400, the more the aerobic basis increases. So there will be an advantage for sprinters. Despite the speed factor, there will also be the aerobic advantage because each and every sprint event do have a base. 100, very little increases every time to 400. So yes, I think they obviously also will have, apart from the fact they can run faster and jump higher, they can also have that.
Okay, Gunter, then Frank. Gunter, answer comment on the altitude?
Yes, you can think that coming from sea level to high altitude in the level of 2,300, you have a reduction of 0.2, 0.3 meter per second in your aerobic capacity after adaptation. And Rita is completely correct. If you look at the performance limiting factors of 400 of the long sprint, we look at the contribution of the aerobic capacity to the anaerobic lactic, kif, similar, 43, 45. So definitely aerobic training for long sprint in high altitude is beneficial. And more long is the distance, more high is the aerobic contribution to the performance, more advantage you get from the high altitude. In that context, be reminded that we will open our training center in Uganda in 2,555 meters from January on for international users. So you are well invited to come to Uganda.
Yeah, I think the offer. Frank, quick question, and then
just very quick, because I threw in a bit about throws and I could see Sean smiling because I think he was actually very aware of the fact that one of the reasons that the East Germans were taking their throwers to altitude was to give them a bit of an aerobic platform to allow them to do more training at higher intensity. Okay,
hey, we have Piotr Hasek back. Piotr, welcome back. Comments on altitude?
Yes, I will say that if I'm looking from Polish perspective and European perspective, if I'm looking at the Potchefstroom, how is using, even this is low altitude, not high, because if we're talking about the altitude training, we need to see high and low because it's the different size. And based on our experience in Poland, we did a lot of researches testing the last 25 years. We know that you need to know that it's actually working on the individuals because we have athletes who are very good responding to the low altitude up to 170. Then we have athletes who are responding only for the high to 4 to 5 or higher. So if you're not sure, don't bring your athletes. If you're sure, you need to know which actually you will get respond what you're looking for.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a good comment. Let's move over to another speed, power, strength event. That's the throws. And for this, we have Sean Pickering here. Sean, welcome. So Sean, for those who don't know, he's the throws performance lead for UK Athletics and team coach for the Tokyo 2020 and London 2012 Olympics. He was a member of the Great Britain Olympic team in Atlanta and the Commonwealth bronze medalist in 1998. Sean, welcome. So 3 events to cover maybe quickly, but yeah, start with your 3 events and I have one quick question for coaching.
Yeah, I have a couple of points. We covered a couple of events in the first of these meetings. We've got actually 6 events that have come since then. So I'm just going to go through a couple of quick things. Let's do the men's first, because I'd also like to bring in Anders Borgstrom on the javelin there. But the one event I was really looking forward to took place today, so it's fresh in the memory, and that was the men's discus final, because it featured Miklas Elekner, the son of Virgilius Elekner. So one of probably the greatest physical talent that's ever thrown the discus. And we're all looking forward to seeing the progress of Miklas. And he was approaching the world record of Nestorenko, which is a little bit questionable world record amongst the throws, because we believe that there was some manipulation in his passport when that record was taken. So we're all looking for that record to be wiped from the books. And Elekner is getting close to it this year, but he did set a championship record with his opening throw 69.81, which is very impressive, and led throughout the competition from that. Quick word, Ralford Mullings from Jamaica. The Jamaicans are now developing a very good tradition in the throws. They've got 2 or 3 very good groups of throws coaches, and particularly in the high schools over there. And Mullings did a good job, and he was perhaps one of the only people that could have challenged Elekner. He opened with, he's thrown over 66 meters, but threw 64, 66, 68. So a new personal best for him. Very, very impressive. And then the other thing, Kartanovic, the Belarusian, finished 3rd. He's a left-hander, which is always a little difficult in championships. Usually the conditions are set up for right-handed throwers in prevailing wind. So, but he threw a personal best of 62.19 to finish 3rd. And what was for me very interesting, none of these athletes are overdeveloped. They're still young, fit, very good athletes, not been thrown into the weight room. Elekner actually is going to go to university in America next year at Cal Berkeley, so it's going to be interesting. He's got a very good coach there in Mo Satara, who's been talking a lot with his father to make sure that they keep him on the right pathway. But I think that's going to be interesting to see how a talent like that develops in the American system over the next 4 years. We've seen some of the Jamaicans go there, but we don't often see some of the European throws talent going there, and he's the best of the bunch. The other event that took place on the men's side yesterday was the men's hammer throw. And again, the overall thing for me on that was these athletes are not super developed. And we've had a real superstar in the last couple of years in Kokan from Ukraine, who finished 5th in the Olympics this year, was the last last World Junior champion. And he's a very special talent. These guys are not quite the same level as him, but we had 4 guys throwing over 77 meters today, and the top three medals were separated by 13 centimeters. So a really good competition. The winner was Jan Dolezak of Czech Republic, 3-turn thrower, quite a tall, not again overdeveloped. I thought he has a lot of potential for the future, and very interesting to watch him, and good speed. And then Ntsakis from Greece opened with a good throw, led the competition 77-78 in the 3rd round, but couldn't improve upon that. And then Dolezak overtook him in the 5th round. Let's go to 77-83, and no response. And then Bruxelles from France, who's the only other guy in the competition that's gone over 80 meters this year, an 80-meter 94 personal best. The number 1 in the world, Hummel from Germany, wasn't present. But Bruxelles, I think, struggled. He got out to 77-70 in the 2nd round, but couldn't improve. Pilat, the European under-20 champion, the Polish guy, threw 77.09. So really good competition. I think some of them were struggling. The speed-based throwers, the circle is a bit rough from what I've heard from some of the coaches over there. And so the speed-based throwers are struggling a little bit with that. So that was a really good hammer throw. And then just to touch base on the javelin before passing over to Anders for his comments. But the one thing that was noticeable for me, I won't go into the technical details, but we've been having some problems with the track. These super fast carpet tracks that are made great for sprinting do not hold up well for javelin throwing. We had a real problem at the Olympic Games. And in fact, Lasper, the Finn, which is great to see a Finn win the javelin on a global title. That's going to open up a lot of good things in the future. He was delivering about 5 meters before the line to make sure he didn't get into the area that was cutting up on the track. So at that point, I'd just like to turn over to Anders, because he's much more skilled at the javelin than I am.
Okay, and I'll present Anders. For those who know Anders Borgstrom, he led Europe's consistent world leadership in high performance javelin and coaching and javelin design. Anders, welcome back again. Your comments on the javelin tonight.
Well, like John, I'm very glad that the Finnish javelin thrower, Janne Lepse, took up the great tradition of Finnish javelin throwing. It was nice to see him on the top of the podium. I can say, just look at his technical execution. It was rather good rhythm and balance and good timing in the throw, but I'm not fond of the diving, and he's diving in a way that can open for some very unnecessary injuries. And talking about diving, how much influence has that on the throwing distance? And I say, after you have released the javelin, you have given the javelin its speed of release, angle of release, angle of attack, angle of jaw, and what you are doing afterwards is just to prevent from doing a foul, nothing else. So I don't like that spectacle with the diving. Okay, the technical level in general among the javelin throwers, I'm not quite satisfied with it. And I would like to underline what Rita said previously, that developing skills, developing coordination at a very young age is extremely important. And I was just happy in a couple of cases concerning how developed they were concerning the technical skills, and that was among the girls, especially Adriana Vilagos. That was impressive, and I think that it should be taken into consideration the development of technical skill and coordination for young athletes. That's an advice I would give to coaches in general, because this is not only influencing the result in the event itself. You have to execute your training exercises with as good technique as possible to prevent injuries and to enhance the beneficials of the training. So that's kind of guideline I would like to give. Work with the skills and the coordination, and it will be paid off in the long run.
Yeah,
I'd just like to add to that quickly, Jimson, that the real key, as I understand it, Anders, and you'll know much better than me, in the javelin, particularly in the men's javelin, is stopping. It's going from 7 meters per second to 0 and passing all that energy through the body into the javelin to release at 30 meters a second. So the ability to withstand that force, the isometric strength that coming in, the eccentric strength of blocking is the most important thing. And then the rest of the body has to be prepared for those forces. And that takes some time to develop, particularly on the male side. So.
No, well, speaking of development, I want to call Amy Dean and Arnie Gullich on this conversation because so Amy is the director of track and field and cross country for the University of Miami. She was also the 2012 Olympic Games women's head coach. Welcome back, Amy.
Thank you. So
quick question. So in the World Juniors, the shot and discus are much lighter weight than they are in the open senior. So for you, the question is, you're coaching at university, people age 18 to 22, more or less. What do you do in, overall in development, especially for the throws, because there's a big difference between a 12-pound shot and a 16-pound shot, right? What's your thoughts on that?
Let me clarify, as far as once we get in the development, or the actually evaluating talent to?
Or both, both, if you can.
I wish I had my throws coach on the phone, but
in general.
Yeah, no. I think I really think that a lot of it is back to the training theory component and I think somebody mentioned a few minutes ago about the young man going to Cal. I think you determine what their background is, what their skill set is coming into university, and then you build a program around it. And it's not something that happens every day. And I think one of the things as an American coach at a university that we look at is it's very, if you want somebody who's going to develop quicker. I think that's why the universities here look towards the European and the international community for the throws, because they tend to be a little more developed a little bit earlier in the process and can make an impact quicker in our university system than some of our younger American throwers. So that's a big part of the identification. But again, I think it's whatever discipline you're looking at is imperative that you look back at where the young person is coming from and developing. You can't just throw a young person into a weight program at 18 when you have somebody in your program that's 23 and been in your program for 3 or 4 years. And I really think it's kind of been a theme of mine and what we've talked about throughout this seminar is that, I really think that we have to take a look back at when we start coaching what their training age and what they're bringing to the table before you can move them forward. And each person looks a little bit different. One thing to backtrack off the throws real quick, and we didn't talk about it because, again, as a hurdle coach, you're the young man from France was, but I don't know how much anybody paid attention to the young Jamaican who was second, who hit and stepped on, I believe, 2 hurdles and, stayed on his feet and clearly didn't have the technical model that the young man from France did. And to me, I would like to see, back to identification talent, junior level to senior level, I would like to see the development of this young man in the next 3 or 4 years, because I'm fairly confident that his training isn't as intense or as thorough as the young man from France. And the ability to stay on his feet and do what he did was a pretty impressive run to me as well.
No, most
Sorry about the throws for a minute, but
no problem. I just thinking of Michael Carter, the American high schooler who still has a world record today, and he ended up winning a silver in LA in '84. So that kind of development went really well, but not always. As we said in the first call, not all athletes who did well in this week will not medal like in the future. So we need to understand why and the pitfalls. But let's get to Arnie Gullich. Your opinion. So Arnie is the head of the Department of Sports Science and the director of the Institute of Applied Sports Science at the University of Technology in Kaiserslautern in Germany. Arnie, welcome back from Thursday.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with everybody again. I'm in Germany, so it's 7 p.m. here. So good evening, everybody. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I like very much what Amy is saying, and I would like to touch the question of what do junior performances tell us? I mean, we've been spending one evening and a bit tonight on evaluating performances of junior athletes, and the aspect was mostly, are they doing well? And I think what matters in junior competitions is that it's well organized, that it is safe, and that athletes are prepared to compete safely. That's the major aspect from my point of view. Whether they get first or eighth, we know that does not tell us much about their future potential. Whether they jump 20 centimeters longer or shorter, or throw 2 meters longer or shorter, we know that does not tell us much about their future potential at long term. So what mostly matters from my point of view when evaluating junior competitions like this one is safety first. So are competitions well organized? Are the infrastructures safe? And do the athletes, are they prepared to compete safely? But anything else, we don't know much about their background. So we don't know whether a winner has already been training for 10 years intensively and specifically, or whether he just started athletics 2 years ago, right? And that will bring me to my second point. I don't know whether I shouldn't be talking too long. Otherwise, I might come back to a second point later as well. Thank you.
No problem. We'll get back to you after this. Frank.
Just a quick one to follow up on that. Arnie, if you were speaking to the coaches and the federations who've just had a lot of success with their athletes in Nairobi, they're going back home now. And of course, for many of them, that's the end of the junior years. There's going to be another couple of years before they get into the peak performance years. What advice would you be giving them now?
Well, all of them are obviously on a good way. Otherwise, they won't compete in the World Junior Athletic World Juniors, right? So there's probably good reason to continue the way they have done so far. Anything else, I think, is highly individual. So what have they been doing in the past? How did they get here? What was their prior experience of preparation? As I just mentioned, somebody who's just been doing athletics 2 years ago will have different tasks to do in terms of practicing essentials of the technique, rather than somebody who has been training intensively and specifically for 10 years, where it may rather, the task may rather be continuing to increase power, endurance, speed, and so on.
Okay, well, just to follow up on that, the reason I'm asking is that we know that the attrition rate between now over the next 2 years will be terrible, just absolutely awful. And what I'm trying, I still couldn't be clear in my mind, how on earth do we stem this flow? How do we, is it something that should have been going on before? Or is there something we can do now to create the bridge?
Rita, you have a question? Your hand up? Comment on that?
I would just like to add what Anya said about, if we didn't even mention it, and I won't talk long about it, in both the 400 hurdles, men and women, the Finnish girl and the Swedish guy, if you look at them, their running technique was very good. So I would say to a lot of the coaches going back now, improve, whether you're a hurdler, sprinter, discus or whatever, improve your running technique, because that is the basis of all the events. And a lot of these kids have got very poor running technique. And I have to say that the two that won the hurdles, the 400 hurdles, their feet placement were excellent. They were nice and upright. They're technically also very sound. So again, the good runners put a good technique over the hurdles. And I would say the running technique needs to be, a lot of emphasis need to be placed on their program. That's my take on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Arnie, your comments on that.
I would like to make 2 points. First, thank you, Rita. I like to hear that. My question is, when do we have to practice things? So is it the earlier the better, or could we as well assume that, yeah, we can also improve technique in our 20s? It's not that if you haven't developed something until age 16, you won't develop it anymore. I think we can continue to learn throughout our athletic career, right? First. The second maybe addresses the question that Frank has raised. We know a few factors that either facilitate or inhibit progress from juniors to seniors. And much of that is the participation history that athletes have once they reach junior age limit, right? So we addressed that on Thursday already, that rather moderate practice intensity during childhood and adolescence within athletics, combined with extensive practice experience, and this is competition-related practice experiences in other sports, seems to be a predictor of long-term sustainable performance development and efficiency of practice in later adulthood. This is one point. The other point is we remember that the most outstanding senior athletes were not the most outstanding junior athletes in most cases. Rather, they even had a decelerated development in their early years compared with their national class peers, right? And maybe just one other point. When we regard German international medalists, other than middle and long distance runners, they competed in a mean of 11 different events up to the age of 15. And up to the age of 19, they competed in 7 to 8 different events. And these were from different discipline blocks, right? So they did speed as well as jumping, as well as throwing, as well as middle distance. And most of them did multiple events. Thank you.
Okay, Frank, one last thing.
Yeah, just to emphasize a point that that Arnie's just made early in that response, and that is that we somehow labor under a delusion that learning is something that happens very early on for technique and technology, and that somehow or other we run out of the ability to learn. Current thinking in neuroscience now takes us much later in life. Look at Federer, for example, in his 30s, relearning his backhand and how he plays the game. And people in golf, if you think of the longevity of golfers, in their 50s and 60s, they're changing, they're learning different aspects of technique. So I think one of the things that coaches have to get their heads around is to revisit their understanding of teaching and learning, because that world is moving forward very fast.
Arnie, your hand up?
Yeah, can I just add one sentence? I think the task for a youth coach, a children and youth coach, is not to make them learn as much as possible, as quickly as possible, specifically. But the task is to enlarge their potential for future long-term learning. In other words, to expand their future learning capital. I think that's the point.
Very good point.
Yeah, Kevin, we didn't get to you yet. You put a lot of great comments in the chat. Thank you very much. So Kevin leads multiple national teams through 4 Olympic Games and over 45 World Championships. He's known for his metrics, performance metrics, data analytics, and he has developed this performance funnel program. Kevin, you put a lot of great comments here. Can you want to elaborate on a couple of them?
I think the biggest mistake of a lot of coaches, and what some of the comments that I put in there, just understanding that performance pathway and that rate of development. I'd see through the U.S. colleges, and having worked at both in university in USA and overseas, that we as coaches in the US would say, listen, I've got between the ages of 18 to 22 to fully develop this athlete, to fully to get to an NCAA, and you may burn up that rate of development. So example, there may be 5% of a rate of improvement throughout an athlete's career based basically from age 18 to 26. And if you've run that 5% or 6% around there, 6 or 7% between the ages of 18 to 22, an improvement, where else do you have to go if you're 23, 24, 25, 26? I'm not saying that you can't improve, but it's again, I've done enough metrics to show that you're using all your cards in the hole very, very quickly. And just understanding that pathway of improving 1.5 or 2% per year is pretty much a gradual increase. Given each event is different, throws, it's a lot later, et cetera, et cetera. But just using the 100-meter dash for an example, I think that's where a lot of coaches go wrong. So I'm 18 and this kid's running 10:30, and next year I want him to run 10 flat. Well, what's that improvement? If you start to burn all that up, this is why a lot of coaches need to understand that performance pathway, how you develop an athlete, that rate of percentage of development throughout the number of years. And then that helps you to stay along that pathway to help build, like Arnie says, for that longer term development, longer as you build an athlete later through that career. But if I'm a college coach in the USA, it doesn't matter to me in that case. I'm trying to get them between 18 to 22. If I'm a European coach, I may start to look at them under 23s. I'm starting to look at, European championships. And so, it all depends geographically where you're at, but understanding the performance pathway, understanding the rate of development is very, very important for a coach. And a lot of people just don't know that data and how to apply that to those athletes that they have.
Okay, a couple of comments here. Rita, you're at.
I would just like to add that if you look at all the top performances, the world records in Japan, and from that discussion now on to here, what do we see? We see a technical improvement that has never been done there before. For example, in the 400-meter hurdles women, Sydney McLaughlin is running 14 strides and then 15. It's none of the other female athletes is doing it at present. I know in the past there was. So what I'm saying is that people are looking all the time for technical improvement to improve results. And when I was at one of the Loughborough courses, what I learned there is that the pole vaulters, a lot of the coaches send their athletes to basic gymnastics training to learn to handle their own body, to know where they are in space. So what we are saying is that the technical ability must be taught, and we know that the stronger you are, the better technically you become. But you cannot learn all that technical ability from scratch. You have to start learning it from the beginning.
Yeah, good points. Gunter, you had your hand up. Comments on Kevin's or Rita's comments?
I would like to react on Rita. Technical improvement. I agree. In the most technical running event in 3,000 steeple, I was, for reasons you are aware, really pleased about the technical improvement in the 3,000-meter woman hurdling the water jump, and even 4 out of 7 relatively correct. But I was shocked when I saw here in Nairobi the poor quality of the top athletes. Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, they did an amazing performance, 8:57, but they were landing in the water jump with both feet and started from 0. So there was a total discrepancy. Yes, in senior level, we can see improvement, but in the female juniors here, this was the worst technical model I've seen for many years, in contrast to the high aerobic and event-specific endurance they had. However, there was a trend. More you looked down the performance into the European athletes, for example, number 5, Ilona from Finland, the technique improved, but they were lacking the aerobic, anaerobic capacity to run fast in between the steeples. The situation looked a little bit better in the 3,000-meter steeple man. Again, it was Africa dominated, but I saw especially the Kenyan athletes, when the race became faster, they were hurdling the water jump. So there is a development in technique, but it's definitely not consistent. And I see the development in Europe, but definitely Africa has to do still some homework in this 3,000-meter steeple.
Great. Okay, anything else on this topic before we move on back to event-specific talks? Okay, I want to move on to the high jump and pole vault. And for that, I want to ask Wolfgang Ritzdorff if he can come on. He's a world-leading authority in high-performance high jump coaching, and he's also director of the top international high jump and pole vault conference in Cologne. Welcome back, Wolfgang. So if you can talk about, say, the high jump, as I believe you have an athlete competing today. You're on mute, Wolfgang.
Thank you very much, Jimson. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, I saw all the excitement of my colleagues from sprints and hurdles, and I deeply understand why you are that excited. Unfortunately, my resume for the jumps is, especially for the vertical jumps, is somewhat different. So understand my perspective. I'm a jumps coach and I watched it on TV, and both of it was a disaster. The TV thing is not our responsibility. Frank, you are smiling, but I'm that annoyed that I must mention it. Yesterday afternoon, I watched 3 hours, the TV coverage, and I saw 4 jumps from the men's high jumps, not even the winning jumps. But I saw 10 minutes for the 800 meters, the presentation of the athletes, the rounds, the second round, the celebrations, the first slow-mo, the second slow-mo, the third slow-mo. And this definitely is annoying. I understand it's not our responsibility, but I was that angry, I must get rid of it. So coming to the high jump, or to the jumps, my resume is, as I said, somewhat different. And honestly, for me, it was quite a poor championships. In all the men's jumping events, we didn't even have a qualifying round. That means the number of entries was that low that it didn't need a qualifying. And the results, In the pole vault, Herbert mentioned it the other day, and also in the men's high jump. The women's high jump is a little bit different. It was quite okay, but the men's high jump, it was really, really poor. A winning height of 226 is absolutely okay, but a third place with a 214, or a fourth place with a 214, and a sixth place with a 210, I think this is really a poor result for a World Juniors. And maybe, yeah, that gives a little bit an extra aspect on our discussion on long-term development. I understand all the arguments Rita is presenting and Arne is presenting, and I do understand that. But if you are a 19-year-old and you clear 210, where is the expectation from that you can make it to the podium in the senior championship? The gap definitely is too big. And there is it's not only about early specialization or too early high intensity. No, the level is poor. And we must ask us as a coach, why is the level that poor? And I think Herbert will confirm it's quite similar in the pole vault. And maybe we do not find the talents, or maybe those who are in a talent program are those who do not really develop. But it's not an argument to say they are, it's not the only argument, the only problem, early specialization. 210 is not acceptable. Women were a little bit better. Maybe that we have some other experts for the horizontal jumps, but in the vertical jumps, it was really poor. One last comment, it really reassures me a little bit that the junior athletes did not copy the technical development of the senior athletes, especially in the men's high jump. We have a huge tendency towards extremely fast run-ups. Bondarenko started it, now Tamberi is doing it like that, Brendan Stark from Australia is doing it like that. And we know, and we found serious injuries in our best athletes in the last 3 or 4 years, that this huge run-up speed is an extreme loading for the ankle joint and the passive structures there. And fortunately, the junior athletes didn't copy it, especially the Israeli who took the gold in the men. He was slow in the run-up, and also even the Italian. Usually our junior athletes, they try to copy our senior athletes. This Italian coming second, he was 100% copy of Tamberi in the pre-jump routine in his concentration phase. First part of concentration like Tamberi, turning around to the crowd. Okay, there was no crowd, but a few of them, asking for claps, 100% Tamberi. And then I was expecting him to copy the run-up of Tamberi, but he did not. So this reassures me a little bit, but the resume for the horizontal jumps is totally different from our sprints and hurdle colleagues.
Okay, well, we'll get Danny Cornelius on in a minute about the horizontal jumps. Kevin, you had your hand up. Any comments on high jump, pole vault, or what Wolfgang said?
Yeah, just real quick. You know, we see those waves of years where the standard of especially, I'll go specifically the high jump, where, you know, years ago the average was at X level, 224, 225. And then it drops down to where we're seeing, you know, just 217 makes a final and does different things. So again, I just wonder, interesting enough, is that because of other sports that are taking in cutting into it? Again, as I kind of grew up, and even though I was a 230 jumper, there's still a lot more 230 jumpers than me. But now 230 actually is NCAA, you know, finalist mark. So, you know, athletes playing basketball, you know, that's really the interesting thing that I see. Why do we have these waves? Not only high jump, it happens in long jump in different other events. So.
Yeah. So any comments on Kevin? So speaking of horizontal jumps, Danny, you're back. Any comments on the long or triple jump today, or all 5 days?
Well, I can say that the long jumps were fairly mixed, or the jumps were fairly mixed. The men's long jump, was actually a very good result. The Frenchman, Konate, jumped an 8.12, which I think was very, very good. It's also personal best, and it's the best in a year also for all the horizontal jumps for the men. Second was 7.97, a guy from Colombia. He also broke a national record. I think he's also not too shabby. And 7.90 for the third place. I was a little bit disappointed today in the triple jump. You know, the winning distance was a 16.43. Which I think was okay. It would have given, it might have given a medal in the past. The second place was actually very weak, a 16.05, and the third place a 15.85. Now that is the weakest medal placing ever for silver and bronze, as far as I can ascertain, which I don't think was very, very good. The great thing is for Warmark, the guy from Sweden that won it, he actually broke a national record as well, and it's the first time that the Swede could actually win a youth or a junior medal. Now, actually, he broke Christian Holmes, no, not Holm, what is his jumper's name, the Swede triple jumper? My goodness. Olsen, yes. He actually broke his national record. Thanks, Sean. He actually broke his national record as a junior. So this guy is actually very, very good. The only thing is, you know, they see this guy jumping in sunglasses and they think they can emulate all that kind of tricks they are doing. The ladies was a double for Askok, the Swede. The triple jump, she won with a 13.75, which I thought was very average. I was really hoping they were jumping 14, so they would be closer to 14s. And she won the long jump by 1 centimeter. A lady from India, Singh, she jumped a PB, although it was wind aided. She jumped a 6.59, and Asgard jumped a 6.60. The 660 and 659 is also not too bad. I think it could be there, but I was a little bit disappointed. I think if the Americans were there and the British athletes, I think we'd have seen much better winning distances. Technically, also there was some. You can see the guys technically were very, very good. The first 3 athletes were not too bad in each event. They knew what they were doing, but there were some very, very weak athletes that went to the finals. And for instance, the main long jump, there was a straight final, which I think is very disappointing, that there's only 12 athletes that can jump. I think that is really a worrying thing. And you know what, if an athlete finishes last and you jump a 7.19, that is not a very good thing of our long jump. But I think if the Americans were there and the Australians and the British, and also the Germans, I think we've done much better. But overall, I think well done for Sweden to have 2 jumpers. She was also the European long and triple jump athlete, and I think it also came through. And I think that girl's going to be a very good jumper in the future. And also, I think the Swede also from the man that won, Warmark, I think he's also a guy with a bright future. I think he can be a very good 17-meter jumper one day. Thank you.
Okay, no, you're welcome. Anyone want to comment on the long or triple jump here?
Can I just, I get the fact that obviously a lot of countries weren't there. I get all that. But what I don't get is not having enough athletes in particular events to have fun, to have qualifying. I just don't get that at all. I mean, even if they're coming in with lesser kind of performances, where are they? I mean, where are you going to get this level of competition experience in your life as a junior?
Correct. Frank, if I may, Jimson, I think also the problem is what you should actually look at also is a number of athletes a country can send, because you can only send 2 athletes. And in South Africa, I mean, we've got 3 athletes that we could have sent. I think if you could actually increase that also to sending 3 athletes per country, I think then we're doing development. Because I see the junior World Championships as a development platform for future athletes. And I think by sending only 2 athletes, I think we're taking away a lot of these athletes, giving them the opportunity to participate on that level. But that's just my take on it.
Well, I would guess that comes down ultimately to the economics that are available for such competitions. But just hope this is not a red herring, but I could just throw a quick question out here, Jimson. We decided that youth was not the right territory for world championships, and so we concentrated on juniors. bearing in mind that in most areas they have under 23 championships. Would it not be more sensible to concentrate on under 23 championships at a world level? Because surely this would give the motivation, a bridge to help us go from junior through to world level. I don't know if colleagues agree with that or not.
Yeah. A couple of thumbs up there. Michael Bennett, comment on that?
Yes, very, very brief. The only challenge, if you are looking at doing a under 23, most times, especially in the US system, you have athletes that compete in college, finish around 22, 23, and then they generally have to be on an international level, an elite level, where they transition right into professional rank, where they go to the Diamond League meets and whatnot, where the necessarily doing the under 23 championships won't be a major draw for those athletes. Maybe there's some athletes that maybe the second tier, kind of like a B level kind of athlete that maybe to compete internationally, but you won't get the blue chip athletes, especially in a country like the United States. You won't get the blue chip athletes because those athletes going to take a contract from a Nike or Adidas or wherever else and go compete on the Diamond League, the Olympics, and so forth.
I get that, Michael. I get that, Michael, but that's pretty culture specific, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, to some degree it is, but you do have a lot of things where you're looking at under 23. It's good they have done it in this region, but at the Pan Am Games for North America, of the Caribbean, South America, but at the Pan Am Games generally was under 23. Then they had the regular senior games. Those allow some of the kind of B-level athletes in the United States that may not be ready for the Olympics or the World Championships. They would go to the Pan Am Games, they'll compete and have opportunity to experience how it is to compete internationally. And then those athletes may, in a year or two or more, end up becoming some of the athletes that are in the Olympics or World Championships.
Okay, we got two hands up here, actually. Gunter, you have your hand up. You go first, then Danny after.
Thank you, Chair. I think that the common element between the youth World Championships, which were stopped, and the actual under 20 is that both are reduced senior championships. So you have a program which is pretty much based on the seniors, and we have missed the opportunity by setting more age and development specific events or even combining events to influence directly the training for these World Championships. Let me share with you in the distance event what I learned and experienced in China in the 80s. The junior championships at that time were a combination in endurance events to encourage in the build-up phase of training speed and technique development. So you would not simply run 3,000 or 5,000 meters. You would combine 3,000 and under distance of 800, 5,000 and 1,500, 800 and 400. And to link it with our friends from sprint, could we not think about a speed-oriented World Championships having 100 meter, but also a 30 meter? And the result is the combination of both. I think we missed this opportunity because we are fully aware, and we discussed it in our last meeting, that one of the factors which cause dropout, that only 6% or less survive and become gold medalists in Olympic Games, is the wrong training, the early specialization. And by changing the competition, we can encourage that, for example, in endurance events, coaches would work more speed-oriented and more technique-oriented.
Yeah, no, good point. Actually, before Rita, you go, Danny, you had your hand up, or is that?
Yeah, I just want to add something, Jimson. I think I agree with what Frank said regarding the under-23s. You know, in South Africa, a few years ago, we had under-23s, and it was actually very, very popular, and we had many athletes. We kept many athletes in the sport. And then our federation decided to actually do away with it. And it was actually sad to see how many people fall away, because I'm doing the stats, and so you can actually track the athletes and their development. and there were many athletes actually going away. And I see also internationally as well. You see very good junior athletes, but many of them don't make it as senior athletes because the step to the next level is just too much and too quick. Where under 23 World Championships, I think, would actually take them gradually into that phase where they can still participate and still develop and last longer. You know, we've got a problem in our country. A girl is 23, 24, and then she decides to get married, and then they just stop sport because there's nothing for them anymore. And we know athletes that's in the late 20s already, the ladies, they do actually very well. So I'm very much for the 20 and 23 international championships, if that can be held. Or I mean, that's a very good idea, Frank.
Okay, Rita, you had your hand up.
I would just like to add to what Sean has said and Gunter, in the fact that the under 20 championships, especially from a lot of the poorer countries and African countries, open doors, not just for overseas, but also local universities. And that under 21 championships, whether it's a medalist or not, the fact that you are under 21 team member, under 20 team member, immediately gives you access to sports bursaries, which a lot of people with the economic situation in the whole world helps a lot for people to study. So if it can be linked, and in a lot of cases it's linked that your sports bursary is every year renewed on your results. In South Africa, I know that is a case. That is most probably going to help you, motivate you to try and work harder, to adapt your program to become a senior athlete. But it's also a harsh reality that once you finish with university, then work starts calling and things like that. So unless you are one of the top ones that make a lot of money, it's very difficult to keep that up. So the majority of athletes will do well if they continue when they are at tertiary institutions.
That's true, and it all comes down to financial support, right?
Yeah.
Any other?
So very quickly, should the areas not be responsible for the juniors and make that kind of a global thing?
Anybody?
I don't know.
Kevin?
Yeah, well, that was the intent of what World Athletics did, is to get rid of the youth championship and switch it to a global area championship, and that that those area championships would then build into juniors and funnel themselves in. And but again, as I was saying in the chat, I think juniors should be in that same way. But I think we should have, they say World University Games is our under 23 championships, but I think a global under 23 championships would then, I mean, that's where you got to catch most of our athletes that could funnel in and would transition better off into a senior championship, where a lot of countries don't have that opportunity to that's where the attrition rate for a lot of athletes is coming from, those age groups. USA has the best system in the world for transition because they've got the most resources in that area. But I think even a junior or globally should be positioned within area championships, and then we funnel in resources more towards under 23 champs.
Okay, Danny, you had your hand up, or is that?
No, I just want to add something to what he said. What Kevin just said. I agree with him. I think we should actually go with the area championships for under 20s, especially if you look at the implements as well, and the hurdles, so the men high hurdles. And there's a big transition between the junior hurdles and the senior hurdles, and then for them to actually run with the big boys, it makes it difficult. But if they can do it like I was watching the European championships, which was incredible. It was very high quality. It was a very good championships, and also the African championships. Also, when it's held, it's always very high quality. And I think that should be more like a development thing on regional, and then another event like the under-23s should actually be between the seniors and the regional development program.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, we have 10 minutes left. I want to talk about distance running. We didn't talk about distance. I want to get back to Gunter Lange and his comments. But so Gunter, I think you joined a tiny bit late, but we talked about Nairobi being at 1750 meters in altitude. It's no surprise the results of all distance events were all African countries. What are your thoughts on the overall distance results this past 5 days?
I think that definitely the altitude has negative influence, but also you could see in quite a lot of the middle long distance races that tactics influenced the time. So we had a 5,000 meter women race today, which started after more than half of the distance was covered. They started running before it was relatively relaxed jogging. We have seen this in other events. So I think that the factor was there influencing the performance, but I found it more interesting that there were some trends, that we had some newcomers. For example, Kenya as an endurance hotspot managed, you may have noticed, to win the race walk man. And the world leader from India became only second. There was no surprise in the female from Mexico. We expected that, but definitely the timing was 2 minutes below their PB for this year. So we have definitely a reduction in the 10,000 meter race walk due to the altitude, because the other performances were on sea level. If you look at the 800 meters, I was pretty constant, 61, then 2:02.96 race in the 800 meters, and an amazing fast race for the male athletes with a 1:43 at the end. So I think the 800 meters, yes, there's 60% aerobic contribution. The altitude plays a role, but definitely less than in the 10,000 meter race walk. In overall, I found the level, we discussed it the other day, performance-wise, adaptation, aerobic, anaerobic system, quite high, but in the technical area, we have a very heterogeneous development. It was definitely level different from Europe, for example, to Africa. I was very pleased to saw, I call it the new generation in 800 meter women. When you looked at the effect which had, in my opinion, this is my private opinion, from Rio on the 800 meter, juniors come now back to the 800 meters because they know this is an event where you can compete and win as a female athlete. So I was very pleased to see a big range of countries being in the final. And it was also a reasonable race. And it was, okay, Ethiopia being the first, but Swiss was second. So there were quite a lot of non-African countries in this normally pretty African-dominated event.
Okay, great. Any comments here on distance running? I know we covered a little bit earlier, but anybody else wants comments? Frank, on the distance?
Yeah, I just this may sound trivial, but I really began to get quite upset when the officials were going to disqualify two endurance athletes who were clearly pretty well fatigued and just stumbled to put their feet across the curve and into the infield, and they were going to be disqualified. I was really pleased. I was really pleased.
Can I react on this? Because this was the reason for my delay. I came straight from the protest, and I have the video of this, and it was the Ethiopian second and the Ugandan, the third athlete. I've seen the video, I have the video. There was no advantage from the two athletes. There was no any kind of performance reducing to the other. And the good point was the curb was too high and too much inside the field. And second, there was no advantage. So we had a parallel, but to some extent, joint protest from Ethiopia and Kenya, and both performances have been reinstalled. But I agree totally with you. You should have seen the athletes. I've seen the Ugandan athletes and the Ethiopian athlete after they were disqualified for this, unnecessarily disqualified, I would repeat it. But I'm pleased that the jury of appeal reacted very quickly after they received the protests from Kenya and the protests from Ethiopia, and both athletes were reinstalled.
I think what was puzzling me is that because precedent had been well and truly set, was it the men's 1500 meters? And I was wondering if they changed their mind with this one, were they going to have to go back and reconsider what happened earlier on? I just think there's some rules in life where common sense should prevail, and maybe we're not allowed to exercise such things when it comes to occasions like this. But I can only imagine the distress that was going to cause these two young people. They were clearly pretty fatigued by that time. And so they were bound to be, the possibility of losing balance was going to be pretty high. But I'm really glad that it worked out the way it did.
Okay, one last event before I forget, the decathlon. It had only 8 competitors like the heptathlon. Sean Pickering, comments on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, one of the constant themes here is about the athletes that were missing and a number of countries that were not taking part here, and that I think was pretty heavily felt in the multi events because, you know, the European champs had something like 28 women competing in the heptathlon, and here only 8 women, and in the decathlon again only 8 men. Quite a big disparity between the winner. Great results at the top end. Dubek from Czech Republic, 8169. Very good performance. Not far off the championship record, which was set by Ashley Maloney just in Tampere at the last edition of this. And Ash Maloney, of course, went on and did very well in the Olympics recently. So, you know, that shows good progress. And Jante Hortekete from Belgium also had a good performance, over 8,000 points, so very good performance. But down at the bottom of the field, 2 athletes from Italy and Denmark down at around 6,400. So quite a big disparity between the two ends of the table. But I just wanted to say that I thought that Dubek, following in the great tradition of Czech decathletes, seems to have another good talent there. Was very, very good. Was very strong on the second day. Hoteketa led on the first day, but was 200 points up after the first day. But the second day, Dubek came on and ended up winning by 116 points. So good performance from him. Good level across all events. So, you know, 14-10 in the hurdles, 45 in the discus, 480 pole vault, 64 in the jav, and 452. I think these guys were probably feeling the disadvantages of altitude at the end of 2 long days of competition. So, so therefore, I think in the conditions to get so close to Ash Maloney was actually a very good, result, and certainly is a kid to be looking at in the future.
Okay, great. Thanks for the recap, Sean. And I think that brings us up to the hour. And at this point, I have to give back the mic to Frank Dick for some closing thoughts. Frank?
Okay, can I sort of rebound that back to Terry? Terry, do you have any final comments on behalf of the Coaches Club?
You're on mute, Terry.
Mute, Terry.
Okay, sorry. Just to wrap up with our topic for today, I want to congratulate our panelists and our moderator on really bringing some important factors into this conversation today as it relates to the athlete's development pathway. I think you've given our coaches participating today some really outstanding thoughts to take back to their training camps, to implement and to perhaps do additional study and research on as they develop the individualism of each of their athletes, and to hopefully that athlete will have a better opportunity with the advice from their coach to reach their full potential, which is one of our major task as a coach. So again, just I think the Coaches Club has been a great success in bringing coaches around the globe together, and look forward to upcoming clubs both in the coming year of 2022 and then going forward all the way through the next Olympiad. And again, we hope to see you face-to-face in these upcoming clubs, but know that we will always be offering a virtual opportunity. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Terry. And before I pass it back on to our superstar host, Jimson, who once again has given us a masterclass on how to pull this stuff together. I want to say a special welcome to a friend that I see sitting back, relaxing, probably in San Diego there, Carlos Caballero. Nice to see you, my friend. Thank you for joining in. He's kind of a very special person to have sat in this session, because Carlos is a member of the World Athletics Development Commission. And so we have a chat every now and again, sometimes via Jeff Gardner. But one of the reasons I'm delighted to see Carlos here is it's kind of reassurance that World Athletics Development Commission is very, very much on the side of coaches and looking for future developments and initiatives to come from us, from the Global Athletics Coaching Academy. But also, Carlos, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but Oceania had their own coaches club during the Olympic Games. Nakatka had theirs. Four areas of Asia had their coaches clubs. And of course, we have this one here, and Europe had its. So the idea's caught on, Carlos. The idea, if we were having this conversation 2 years ago, would be to have an on-site club whenever we went to major championships, so that coaches who are coming in, who weren't accredited, who couldn't go into the village, would at least have a place to go and have this kind of conversation. But in between time, along came this terribly tragic situation of COVID, where we all learned to communicate the way we are doing right now. And so that opened the door to the idea of having a virtual coaches club. And I hope you've enjoyed it, Carlos, because the spirit that's come from these wonderful people who've been on the panel and who've looked in, this is the voice of coaching, talking about issues, not just about this or that event that happened today, but some of the bigger issues that are out there. And I know, because you're quite a fan of what we do, you'll be on our side on this. We're going to have some good conversations over the next few weeks on how we take this idea forward. We've also got on side here today, Wendy Trevelyan, who is in charge of Coaching Matters. And the way I'm sort of seeing what's happening here is that this kind of population that we have, you should be part of Coaching Matters too. We'd like to see you attending these sessions. And it's made me wonder just how far can we take this mode of intervention, this mode of communication, this mode of connecting coaching worldwide. How far can we take this? Just how much potential is there on this? I think we've started a fantastic adventure here. And I'd like to thank personally Jimson for the fantastic job you've done, my friend, been absolutely outstanding. I'd like to thank, I don't know if he's hiding somewhere, Stefan Marlino for doing all the technology stuff behind this. And of course, our dear friend, Giacomo, whose young daughter was going through her, what's it called, Jimson? I've forgotten.
Baptism or First Communion?
Yeah, she was going through her first communion today, so he couldn't be with us. But we all wish him and Costanza, the young one, a fantastic day celebration. So thanks to them, thanks to you, and thanks to all you panelists. Particularly again, Sean, can I pick you up on the and Gunter, thank you for the courage of getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning and supporting us from Tokyo when you did. I'm pretty sure that was knocking your sleep patterns for in all directions. Once again, panelists, I can't believe how good you've been. Thanks for making this a big success. Tomorrow, by the way, we're dipping our toe into other water. Tomorrow evening, and on the 6th, we are having our very first coaches club for the Paralympic Games. So we're bringing in coaches from that world to hopefully share with the kind of ideas that you're bringing to the party to make sure that their coaching goes one step further in the future. Thank you very much for supporting this idea. Back to you, Jimson.
Thanks, Frank. Yeah, so just to recap, there is a link on the chat. Tomorrow night, same time, it's the Paralympic Club. We have 2 sessions, 2 weeks apart. So if you can join, it'd be great. The other one, I think Frank is too humble to mention that he's actually interviewing Ans Botha on Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 UK. And for those who don't know, Ans was a former coach of Wade van Niekerk of South Africa. So again, the link is there. Big sign up here. So you might have a hard time asking questions. So please join up there. So yeah, that's it. I hate to say goodbye, but I think it's been a wonderful hour and a half. It goes by like this for me. I don't know about you, but I do want to thank all the panelists tonight. Without you guys, this would not be possible. So, Danny, Cornelius, Terry Crawford, Arnie Gullich, Amy Dean, Kevin Ankrum, Sean Pickering, Anders Borgstrom, Rita Engelbrecht, and of course, Wolfgang Ritzdorff. And there's a couple other people here, Michael Bennett. And also we had Gunter Lange. I got it right, Gunter Lange. After all this time, thank you for, again, commentary on distance. And Frank, again, thank you. And that's it. I want to close it up. Hope to see you tomorrow. If not, I understand because you don't coach Paralympics, but do try to attend on Thursday. I think it'll be interesting to hear from Wade's former coach. Frank, one last thought?
One last thought. It was briefly mentioned, but please don't miss an opportunity to join Wolfgang Ritzdorff's high jump and pole vault session in November. It's the world's best. Make sure you're in there. And oh, by the way, IFAC's coming up pretty soon too, and the NACATCA conference.
Yeah, IFAC's November 5th to 7th. The NACAC is a week later in Puerto Rico. Hopefully Corona's under control. We'll see you in person in November. I'm going to try to be there as much as possible. Unless anyone has anything else to say, again, thank you everyone. And we'll hopefully see you tomorrow or on Thursday. Thank you very much.
Great job.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thanks,